While we were there, we had a lot of visitors, and I wound up going to, how do I do this? Forward here, right?
Yeah.
No,
To
just down.
down, to Bokop, which is the old, what they call the Malay Quarter, which is sort of a misnomer because it was the slave quarters. Bokop means above the Cape, and so it went up from the central city area up the slopes of Signal Mountain, and was originally the area that housed slaves. The Dutch government forbade the Dutch East India Company from enslaving the local population, and so what they did was to import slaves from other places where they had outposts, and so they would take people who were in disfavor there and transport them to Cape Town to be slaves. Some were Indian, some were Malaysian, a lot were Indonesian. Oh, I didn't go there. This is a picture of, on the left, it's Shireen, an Arcadian, who was our tour guide and who is a really interesting person. I must have gone on 6 tours with her with different groups of people. And she was saying, oh, you shouldn't pay any more because, you've been through this before. But I felt like she was in business. But she was just a wonderful tour guide. And a couple of the tours we did included some culinary things. And on the right is Yasmina Isaacs, who was her kind of her go-to person for teaching people how to make, they call them samosas, they're not samosas, samosas and butter chicken and other really good things that are part of the Malay tradition or the Indonesian tradition or the Indian tradition. That the book that she put together that includes, these are pictures from that book. There's a book called Bokop Kitchen. It's on the back table there if you want to take a look at it. But it collects the stories of these people and then some of their recipes. So it's quite wonderful. And Bokop area, even though these people were slaves, they managed to create, bring their own really vibrant culture into this area. The reason that the Cape area has a very high number of Muslim believers. So the Muslim community is very significant in the Cape area, and because of, do I click on it?
You can click on it.
Okay. And actually, and this is the colors that they paint the houses are really vibrant, and so it makes it a very beautiful area. And it's a favorite area for fashion shoots. And in fact, it gets ahead of the season. So, in the northern hemisphere, it's winter, and in the southern hemisphere, it's summer, and so they can take pictures of summer clothing and then put them in magazines meant for the people in the northern hemisphere. These are my brothers and sisters-in-law on a tour that Shireen arranged. And this is one of the many mosques in Bokop. Bokop is a relatively small place, but it has, I think, something like 16 mosques. It has a huge number of mosques, and this is one of them. This is the one we visited on the interfaith bus tour. So, and actually this photograph was taken that day. These are some pictures of the townships in the area. When they passed the Group Areas Act in 1950, they removed people from places that they wanted to designate white. They designated different places according to the 3 main designations of the population, so that would be colored, black, and white. There were multiple other designations, as we learned from Shireen, that sort of fell within those categories. There were categories like honorary white, or other white, or Indian and Chinese, other kinds of people were categorized within those bigger categories. But basically those 3 categories determined where you could live. And if you were white and you married someone who was colored or black, you had to change your designation or you couldn't live together. You were not allowed, white people were not allowed to live in those areas that were designated black or colored. They had a thing about mixing. So So here are some of the areas on the Cape Flats. You can see this is Devil's Peak.
You gotta go
Oh, this
click
is-
on it.
Oh, I have to click on it, right. Sorry, I'm not so good at this stuff. Where's the thingy?
Right here.
No. So this is Devil's Peak and Table Mountain in the background, and these are actually built homes. So some of them were built homes. There were a lot of homes that were built. They did build people homes when they first sent them out there. But what happened is there was tremendous amount of movement into the area, especially into South Africa generally from other war-torn areas, but also into Cape Town, which today has the most progressive government in the area. It's in South Africa. It's run by the Democratic Alliance, which is the chief rival to the ANC, and it has cleaner government. But I was shocked to find out when I was doing some research for a proposal for an organization I was working for, that from 2001 to 2011, in the census, the Cape Town area population grew by 50%. Much of that came from the Eastern Cape, which is very, very poor rural and very, very poor, has extremely poor medical, everything. The schools are terrible, and they came because the Western Cape was a better place. But the result was informal settlements that surround many of the old townships, informal settlements that grew up on their own, and they're largely shack communities. So these are shacks. Some of them have electric and some of them have not. Some of them have stolen electric. They bring it down from the pole themselves at risk of their lives and electrify their homes. But yeah, so this is sort of the situation right now. This is another kind of informal settlement close to Soweto. The bill went, at one point, he was stuck in Johannesburg, and he was lucky to meet someone who would give him a tour. And so this is part of his tour. He said the little girls there were singing. Everyone there sings. I mean, it's amazing in 4-part harmony. So they learn to sing very young. I learned that when I visited a creche. Several creches, actually. I worked for a while for an organization called Abalimi Bazakaya. That's why I was doing proposals. Abalimi has been around since the 80s, and it is promoting micro-farming in the Cape Flats as an alternative way to have a job, because jobs are so scarce. They have here a garden center. This is Mabel Bacolo, who ran the garden center in Nyanga, one of the townships in the Cape Flats. There in that garden center and another garden center they had in Khayelitsha, they teach people how to farm. They do the basic farming course there, which is 4 days, and teaches people basically how to farm and how to raise enough to take care of themselves. So they go they've got a range from subsistence farmers all the way to sort of semi-commercial farmers. And so what happens is people develop their farming skills, and they begin to sell things over the fence, and then they may get involved, and this is also part of the garden center. It serves as a sort of demonstration garden as well. Then what they decided to do, gosh, I can't remember the year, but it was maybe about 10 years ago, was to develop a CSA program, the first in the South Africa, certainly the first in the Cape Town area. And so this is the pack house, and they're packing vegetables that they get by contract with their farmers. They're semi-commercial or a little below that farmers. And they pack this stuff and deliver it to the suburbs so it's an income transfer program, which works out pretty well. This is a creche, Love and Faith creche, that was run by a woman named Tobeka. She had a big operation. She had a community garden. She had the creche, which is they call nursery schools creches there. And she had a women's empowerment program with a lot of seminars on various things, including kind of skills development seminars and beading and things like that, so that they could find work. And Langa, that was another place where we had tours. Langa is the oldest of the townships. It was developed to house men only, because they wanted men as workers, but they didn't want their families. So Langa has, and it was built in the 20s, so it goes back a long way. This is our guide, Tondo. He was wonderful. Behind him is a dormitory, basically. These were sort of barracks that were built for the men. Some people live in these, other people live in shacks. They are, fortunately, the Cape Town government has been building a lot of apartments, and actually they were doing a pretty good job of getting them together. I was surprised how fast they were getting built. And people are being moved from the shacks into apartments. But the worst place to live is in these barracks. Here is the inside. You can see it's really pretty dilapidated. They're in the process of updating some of them, trying to renovate them. Oops, I went back. But they're pretty depressing circumstances, and they may have 4 bedrooms with maybe 5 or 6 families living in them. So people sleep on the floors and everywhere. And then here's a kitchen.
You haven't gone to the kitchen
I haven't
yet.
got the kitchen. Here's the kitchen. That's exactly how wide it was, and dark and dismal. So those were the circumstances there. Our guide Tondo lived in one of the shacks, and as we were leaving, he was just getting to the point where he was probably going to be the next. His family would be the next who were would be eligible for an apartment. And anyway, these are pictures of Cape Town. That's the Table Mount. Oh, whoops. That's Table Mount. I'm looking at the picture on here and thinking it's there. This is Table Mountain with the tablecloth. The winds would blow it over the top. This is a view from Table Mountain. And here is the City Bowl, picture of the City Bowl.
And you can see right there is where the nuclear power plant is and where we were living, which is the 18 miles from there. And this was the main harbor. And it's a beautiful view from up there. It is phenomenal. And then we can't even go through all of the pictures because of the time.
Yeah, so this is national park, beautiful national parks they have. This is the West Coast National Park, the Postberg section, which is actually privately owned and is opened up in early spring because the wildflowers go mad. And so this is sort of the wildflowers, and that's the African sacred ibis.
And then the last little thing that we'll do, and unfortunately we can't go into a lot, here's us going to Cape Point, and you could see in the background here is the actual lighthouse. And then this is what the point looks like from there. And you can see this is where the lighthouse is, and it was built up so high that when the clouds came in, they couldn't be used, and therefore there was a lot of crashes. So, and they ended up building a new modern lighthouse down here where it's basically can be seen in the worst fog conditions. And then this is showing the lighthouse, the old lighthouse, and the walk that goes up there. And it's a wonderful thing. And now we're going to basically,
I think that's it.
we're way over time.
I'm
I
sorry.
apologize.
You don't need to apologize, but what we want to do is invite you, please, one more time or 2 more times to share all of the other things that you experienced and that we can ask questions. For today, maybe those of you that want to join in for coffee, if you have questions, but if there'd be a way, maybe you could come back this summer and share even more with us, that would be fabulous.
June 5th, maybe, yeah. I think June 5th we'll do it. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.